Hey folks, so last night at the end of Smackdown, we found out who Roman Reigns' next opponent's going to be. And no, it's not going to be a rematch with, Matt Riddle or anything like that, because the stipulation in story is Matt can't get another shot if he didn't win this one. And unfortunately, it's not going to be Cody because of his torn pec, nor is it going to be Randy because of his back. Nope. Instead, WWE decided to go back what I guess they feel is thrive and true, or whatever that saying is. They decided to go back to Brock and Roman. And I'm going to tell you honestly, the reaction from even people like Sean Ross Sapp, it's understandable. It's understandable because, we've done this match so many times. And a lot of people even use this revelation as an example of, hey, Vince McMahon may have stepped down as CEO and chairman and put his daughter in his place until the time was right for him to potentially resume that position. And basically is instead still in charge of creative. A lot of people use that move, and adding on to Brock showing up last night as an example of, Vince only made that move to make himself look good, and that it's all but nothing more than a cover. It's all but nothing more than a cover for the fact that he's still running the joint. He's still running it. That he may say he's in charge of creative right now, but he still has the final say, no matter how it's spun or anything. And that again, the only reason he made Stephanie the interim CEO and chairwoman in his absence in that position is to make himself look good. Again, a lot of people have said during this whole Vince McMahon situation currently is that he's one of the smartest businessmen around. He knows how to kind of stay a step ahead when it comes to certain situations like what's going on right now with these allegations. So for him to stay a step ahead by saying, ooh, if I make my daughter the interim CEO and chairwoman in my place and say I'm still going to be in charge of creative, he knows that not only that makes him look good, but he knows that's going to, basically get, people, off the set a little bit, while, he's still secretly running things. In other words, let's be honest, he could say he's in charge of creative, but he is still secretly having the final say. People assume, and rightfully so, that he basically went to Steph and said, hey, I'm going to make you interim CEO and chairwoman in name only, but I still have the final say. So whatever they come to you about to get your final say on, you call me up real quickly or you text me, I'll give you the answer. That's pretty much how people are viewing it. And with Brock Lesnar being revealed as Roman Reigns' next opponent at SummerSlam in a last man standing match, a lot of people feel gives off those vibes. And rightfully so. I mean, like I said, Sean Ross Sapp wasn't happy about it. I mean, he was happy at first to see that Brock Lesnar had arrived, but then realized, oh shoot, we're doing that again, aren't we? But I also think if you look at it, and I'm not trying to justify the decision, I understand people's criticism on it, but if you look at it from the perspective of Vince McMahon, let me ask you this, who has everybody compared Vince McMahon to as of late when it comes to a promoter's mindset? What other promoter was very similar in booking, the same matchups time and time again, or going a certain direction when they shouldn't? Who was similar in that? I'll tell you who. Vern Gagne, AWA. How many times did Vern Gagne book himself as champion? How many times did he book certain people as champions? Let's put certain matchups together that we had seen numerous times, or people at that time had seen numerous times. A lot. And Vince McMahon has that same mindset as we speak, which is why he's going with Brock and Roman. Because in his mindset, if there's anything that potentially is going to sell out the Nissan Stadium in Nashville, it's going to be Brock and Roman. That's what he feels is going to sell it out. It's going to bring in a lot of attendance. It's a tried and true as much as we had said, it's a tried and true formula that seems to, as much as a lot of us hate to admit it, end up working. It ends up working, much to a lot of people's regret. I mean, let's look at it from another perspective. One person or two people that Vince was able to get into his company, at the same time back in the mid 2010s, 2015, 2017, whatever. One of the two people he got into his company always seemed to have match after match. It's like, the promoters of NWA, WCW always went back to this when they needed something to draw in a big crowd or for a certain storyline to have a culmination. And that one matchup was always Sting versus Flair. Sting versus Flair. Sting versus Flair. Sting versus Flair. Even TNA did Sting versus Flair. And, despite the fact that, they had great matches or decent matches throughout all their encounters, how many times was that matchup done? A lot. Yeah, you could change the aesthetics and the appearance of both men, throughout, the rivalry, throughout these many matchups. But how many times was that done? What? Just as much, if not more, than what we got going on with Brock and Roman? Probably. Now, you might say, well, that was a different time and everything, and people were more accepting. Were they? Were they more accepting? Or did WCW, NWA have a roster that they could have plucked from to give Ric Flair fresh opponents, Sting fresh opponents? And you might say that's what they did. And I agree, they did do that. But they always seem to come back to Sting and Flair. Sting and Flair, Sting and Flair. Heck, speaking of Flair, how many times did they have a matchup with Hogan during Hogan's time in WCW? Probably just as much as what's going on with Brock and Roman. But did people complain? No. They enjoyed it. They embraced it. They might have changed things up here and there, may have reversed roles like Brock and Roman are currently doing right now, but they still ate it up. They still loved it. And yeah, there were different match types as well. The barbed wire steel cage at Uncensored. The Indian strap match at Uncensored in 2000. They had a lot of different encounters with different match stipulations. Even in Fatal 4-Ways as well. And did people get sick and tired of it? No, they embraced it. I mean, deep down, maybe they were like, oh, here we go again. But the end result was something that they enjoyed. Maybe not all of the matches were good, same with Sting and Flair, but it was something they enjoyed. And there's no getting around that. There's no getting around that. And, when you look at what's going on with Brock and Roman, you might say, you might say that this has to stop. This is ridiculous. Why do you keep going on this? You have all these other options. Well, guess what? So did WCW. They had a lot of options too. Now, people might say, well, that's what caused them to go out of business. Not particularly. There were other things, I guess you could say notorieties that caused them to go out of business. But the thing is, putting Flair against Hogan multiple times, more so than they needed. Sting and Flair together more times than they needed. They did it because they knew it drew. Once you put that on the marquee, it was going to draw. No matter how much you wanted to hate on it. No matter how much. And I think when you look at it from that perspective of Brock and Roman, as much as WWE should be choosing somebody else like an AJ Styles and an Edge or a Finn Balor or a Damian Priest, or heck, even call up a Braun Breaker to face Roman for the title at SummerSlam, as much as they have all these variety of options, they go back to that because Vince McMahon, like a Vern Gagne, has that old school mentality of go back to what sells, go back to what brings in the masses. And that's why they did it. Even if they change it up with this encounter being Last Man Standing, they do it because they know it's going to bring in the masses. It's going to bring eyes to the product. And not just hardcore wrestling fan eyes, but overall combat sports eyes. and sporting fan eyes, period. They know it. They know it. And maybe as much as a lot of people may hate to admit it, maybe there is more to this than it's being let on. Maybe they are going to find a way to incorporate this as a jumping off point to Rock and Roman at WrestleMania next year. You know, we have to look at it from that perspective. We have to look at it from that, situation. But, when you get down to it, whether we like this decision or we don't, we'd rather have somebody else in Brock's place, which I agree should happen. It's an old school mentality that Vince has. Go back to what brings in the masses. Go back to what works. No matter how many times we've done it, go back to what sells, to what gets people's attention. I mean, let's be honest. How many times did they do John Cena or Randy Orton throughout their run in the company, from when they first encountered each other on the main stage of WWE to now? How many times? Probably just as much as Roman and Brock, right? And did people crap on it? Yeah, they crapped on another encounter between the two, but they never said, "Oh, WWE has all this other people they should do this and this with." No, they did. Nobody really crapped on it as much. I mean, they may have voiced their disapproval of it, but they never really crapped on it too much. And why? Because they knew these two had good chemistry, and no matter how many times they faced each other, people were going to watch. People were going to want to see what the outcome would be this time. So, as much as we may want to crap and shit, and vocally voice our disapproval of this, again, it's an old school mentality of go back to what works. Despite all the other options you have, go with what works. Go with what is going to sell tickets. It's going to bring in the masses. It's going to bring attention to you, more positive attention than negative, and just go from there. And look, I'm not saying I don't think WWE should have chose somebody else. I think they should have. I think Vince should have chose somebody else. But again, he knows from an old school mentality what brings people's attention, what gets them a reaction, what brings in the masses. And if he believes this is going to do it, then this is going to do it. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. But yeah, that's why this whole Brock Roman SummerSlam Last Man Standing match is happening. It's not because he doesn't have all these other options, which he does and he could choose from and rightfully should do, but he did it because he's using that old school mentality of go back to what works. When all the other options you had planned out, are put on the back burner because of reasons, injuries and all that, go back to what works. And that's what he's doing. That's what he's doing. He's using that old Vern Gagne mentality of if I can't have this match, I'll go with this match even though I've done it multiple times. Same thing with WCW and NWA. If they can't have this person in this role, they'll put that person in the role, as much as people may not like it. And we just got to deal with it. We just got to deal with it, and hopefully maybe with Stephanie being in charge of the company right now on an interim basis, maybe she will talk to her dad and say, "Dad, you might be in charge of creative, but right now I'm your boss." And basically maybe she'll kind of tell him that this has got to be the last time. This has got to be the final time. But what do you guys think? Do you think this is just, Vince not creatively knowing what to do? Or do you think, as I'm pointing out, it's just an old school mentality that he has of go with what works when the other options you want to go with are not available? And do you think maybe Stephanie might step in and say, "Hey, this has got to be the last time this happens"? What are your thoughts? Comment below, live chat during the premiere. Super chats will be available during the premiere, and super thanks after the video. Give me your thoughts. And I am out.